way of doing it. Then the next thing, and the most important thing for us, is education. Because if you have a society where only the rich have access to education and the poor remain poor and are not educated, your income gap will widen. The rich will get richer, the poor will get poorer, and that sense of inequality, inequity, the sense of being shut out deepens, and then people begin to feel that's not fair. So part of our education policy was we want to make sure that everyone has access to education. And so national schools were built, education very heavily subsidized, so that, at that time we didn't have to pay very much. I still remember paying my school fees. When I went to primary school, I paid $6. And when I went to secondary school, it was $12. The rest was subsidized by the government. So essentially, my education, all the way up to university, pretty much about 80 to 90% of it was paid by the government. And the reason why I'm speaking to you in English today, the reason why I can read, I can write, is because the government pumped in all that money because they believed in their people. So education is the key to being able to succeed. If you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. If you teach him how to fish, then he eats for a lifetime. And that's what education is about. It's teaching you how to fish, not giving you the fish. And so national policy again basically roll out. Education became compulsory not too long ago, but even before then there was a big push to make sure that everybody has access to education. This doesn't mean that we have wiped out all the inequalities. This doesn't mean that we still don't have a bottom 20%. But that commitment to educating people has made the difference as to why Singapore managed to develop so fast. It was the recognition that people are our greatest resource. So this really brings us up to the 70s, where we were in our early years of development. We obviously worked very hard on the economy as well. We realized that we couldn't do it on our own, so we had a lot of special economic advisors from the different international organizations who encouraged us or basically advised what areas we should build. Then we came to 1980s, because the 70s was all about building new buildings, building new schools, getting people educated. But we sadly neglected the arts. And people felt that, we were a cultural desert. So in the 1980s, there was more emphasis on arts and culture. 1990s also, more expansion of that. 2000s posed us with a very different challenge. 2001, as you know, was September 11th. That was when the terrorists attacked America. The Twin Towers came down. And immediately, we recognized overnight that that old ghost had come back to haunt us, the potential for racial and religious divides. Because it would be very easy to see that in the context of something like that, people may be eager or quick to point fingers at a particular racial or religious community and say, oh, this is done by people of this community. So we could see the tensions beginning to come about again. And that is why, from the 2000s onwards, we have again worked very, very hard at making sure that we manage our racial and religious communications with each other, and we keep emphasizing why it's so important to get along. For those of you who listened to Prime Minister's National Day rally speech, you will understand what he was talking about. So as you can see, from the time we became independent right up to today, this theme of being multiracial, sensitive to other races, has been a constant theme, and it's all about how we preserve a common identity and work together as a team in Singapore. But as we were developing, especially the 80s and the 90s, we realized we didn't have enough Singaporeans. Not enough Singaporeans to grow and develop as fast as we would like to. So obviously, we would need people from outside, people from other citizens who would come and work here, live here, not necessarily stay here, although we hope that they would do so. That brought a slightly different perspective, because What you then had was a situation where you've got the Singaporeans who've had like about 30, 40 years of national identity. Now you're bringing in Indians from India who are not Singaporean Indians, but they're Indian Indians, if you like. We're bringing in Chinese from China, not Singaporean Chinese, China Chinese. And of course, we still have an influx of Malays from Malaysia. And by this time, we've gotten our own identity. They have their own identities which come from the countries that they come from. And as you can imagine, sometimes there may be misunderstandings, sometimes there may be little conflicts here and there. So because of this new dimension, there's also been a lot of emphasis on encouraging Singaporeans to be open, to welcome people who come to live here, work here, study here, and at the same time to encourage those who have come from abroad to be in Singapore, to also open themselves up to Singapore society, make friends, understand our different cultures. And I say cultures because Singapore has got so many. I don't know if you read the newspapers this morning, but if you look at the newspapers, you'll see that the Chinatown Shopkeepers Association are actually organizing tours in Chinatown for the Seven Moon Festival. Some of you may have seen that. It's a very noisy festival. Basically what happens is that they have a dinner, everybody attends the dinner, but they have these items which they auction off. So you have this guy who's standing down there and he's yelling at the top of his voice, auctioning off these things. People will bid for it, but they don't pay this year, they will pay the following year. And the following year when they pay, that money is used to have another dinner. So it goes on. And sometimes you have the stage shows. So now you can see that, the pole dancers are very popular at the stage shows, which are known as Kertai. And that's, I suppose, I'm not saying that you have to change your religion. I'm just saying that you need to know that this is what they do and just have an understanding of why it is in the middle of the night there's all that noise going on. They're supposed to stop by 10:30, but sometimes they don't. But people, they understand that during this period, those festivals are going on. It's called the Hungry Ghost Month because in their belief, this is the period when the gates of the underworld open and all the hungry ghosts come out looking for food and I think people, and basically they do it for 1 month and then they go back, which is why you will sometimes see food laid out as well. It's supposed to feed the hungry ghosts. So just in case you were wondering why the food was there. But it's little things like that that make you sensitive because sometimes they have the joss sticks which they put on the floor, and if people don't realize or not sensitive when they're walking, they may kick it over. That causes great offense, but it was unintentional. So it's all these little things. And so what I'm saying is, all of you who have come to Singapore are people who we welcome very much, we value very much, we treasure very much. What we hope you will do is learn about us, and what we hope that we will do is learn about you, so that at the end of the day, what we're building is a cosmopolitan society where Singapore benefits not just from its own people, but from those who visit us. Some come on a short-term basis, some stay a little bit longer, and some eventually become permanent residents, some become citizens. Let me tell you one other aspect of the Singapore story, which I mentioned earlier. And because I've dealt with education, I've dealt with the bonding, I've dealt with our economic development, sort of. The one that I haven't dealt with yet is defense. When we started off, like I said, small little country, no armed forces to speak of, we were very, very vulnerable. Because the temptation is always that when you have a little country, bigger countries can push it around and bully it. So we decided that we must have our own defense force. At that time, no one was really willing to help us to do this. So if you read Minister Mentor's book, From First World to Third, he explains how we came to have our own army. The only people who agreed to help us at that time were the Israelis. But because of the region that we live in, it was felt that it would be very sensitive if it was known that the Israelis were training our army. So it was generally given to be understood, or the impression was given, that we were being trained by the Mexicans. Of course, by the time we had finished that, and by the time people realized that they weren't Mexicans, we'd already had our first little